Thank you very much, viewers. And I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome you to another edition of Hope. This is the first show for 2018, and Hope stands for Community's Own and Personal Elevation. Within this segment, we have tourism hits, where we talk mostly about tourism and all that it entails. That's one aspect of it. We'll be bringing the other matters, health, legal issues, politics, and the whole works. That's part of the dynamics. We've been in absentia for a while, and purposely so. Having done the program for quite some time, we went into abeyance more to sort of reform ourselves and decide what it is and where it is that we'd like to go. People keep asking me time and time again, why are we not doing the live program and so forth, especially some of the aspects that they love, especially the spiritual view that deals with religion mostly. But we decided to take a break, and for so many reasons. Having thought about it so many times, we decided, well, it's time for us to get back on here to deal with some of the issues. My grandmother had a saying where she always said, everything would fit in, would fit her. And that's such a profound statement in expressing such simplicity. There's so much to say right now. And Bob Marley, whose name I mention practically every day, comes to mind with this so much to say, especially what is happening within our environment right now. But no worries, because as we also said, everything is going to be all right. And I am certain I live with and in hope. And no matter the dark clouds, I'm not a kind of person who loves rain. No matter how the sun is hot, I never complain about the sun hot, but I complain about the rain. I'm not a rain person, I'm a sunshine person. So I'm very optimistic, and I understand the need at times for pessimism. So there's balance in me pretty much. As my own personality, my sign says balance. I'm Gemini. And you know, we have the good side and the so-called bad side. I usually try to balance them so that we get the whole me. Today, we come to you, and pretty much that's where we'll be coming from. Hard Rock Cafe will be the home for hope for the foreseeable future. And I'll let you know, right in Freeport, not Hard Rock in California or in Florida or whatever, but definitely the one, Freeport, Montego Bay. And that's where we're coming to you from today. And we'll be coming to you from this location. Just about everyone that is here will take the opportunity to welcome our viewers and hope that you will enjoy what it is that we have to offer. Guest today is Mr. Andre Dixon, Chief Operating Officer for Viking Productions. And it's best that we go and delve into it rather than me giving you one of those sort of biography to say he's this, that, you know, the kind of thing that you do when you're presenting someone for a talk show or for a guest speaker. No, I'm not going to take you through that. So without further ado, I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Andre Dixon to our program. Welcome, Andre.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right. Today we touched a little bit entertainment, but I wanna go right to the beginning. How did you get into entertainment? Because your journey has been a long one.
It has. Great question. Even back in high school, you probably know by now that I'm a dual citizen of the United States and Jamaica. So in the United States in my earlier years, I decided to take an interest in drama, music, and all those things. And I didn't know what it was going to turn out to be. I did some high school plays and collaborations with some centers in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And so we put on plays like The Wizard of Oz and Jesus Christ Superstar and a bunch of other things. And that's sort of how I got my feet wet in the entertainment business. But to fast forward from that, I went to the Air Force for 14 and a half years. And in some of my journeys in the Air Force, I got a chance to be on the radio in Holland, did some broadcasting in Germany. And I also had some stints, and you'll find this ironic, that there was one time in which I actually played the futuristic black president of the United States.
That's really.
At that point, I think, what were we talking about? That was in 1988.
That was foretelling.
Right. So at that point, people probably thought it was laughing.
Yeah.
But obviously, the premonition turned out to be something that came true. So I look back at that then. You know, I have photos of that Venison Man. You know, how profound was that back at the time. But I really got involved when I moved to Las Vegas back in 1995. 95 was in the Luxor Hotel. I'm not sure if you know that one. That's the pyramid-shaped hotel.
No, I don't know it, but you know, Vegas. I've heard of it,
Right.
but I don't know it personally.
So in the Luxor Hotel, there was an opportunity. I auditioned for a role that 12 actors did some recurring roles in a live studio audience type of show. I was fortunate enough, out of the 250 that auditioned, to be chosen for that. So that's where it kind of started in my adult life of getting back into performing and entertainment. And then I got a job with Steven Spielberg in one of his concepts called Die.
No, that is an interesting point that you're coming to, because I read that in some of the information that I have.
Right.
But what I want to do is to take you right back to high school and Air Force. What was that like?
You know, high school was interesting because it was during that time period, especially in the United States, racial tension was pretty high. So I happened to go to a high school at the time, you know, not many years after the so-called segregation in Boston, in which the population of Caucasians was 70% to 30% black at the time. So it was interesting trying to keep your mind focused on being involved in entertainment and athletics and those sorts of things amongst an environment.
What was your best sport? What was your best sport?
I was a good basketball player. It's always been my calling, being a good basketball player, and then football was partly.
The reason I ask is because from I've known you, you've been like a football player.
Yeah,
I would have thought.
And I played football too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Now, you know, some of this build came from some latter days.
Yeah.
When I was, you know, in the Air Force and I was stationed in a place which was top secret and all that. I'll get to that story later. But being in a top secret environment, there, you know, you had a chance. I couldn't leave the environment. So what did we do? We had Olympic signs, bump irons, kind of like being in prison, right? Those guys don't have anything else to do. But you know, on the other side, we actually were doing something intellectual, and then in our off duty, we did a lot of that. But in high school, it was just an interesting mix of having to juggle the racial tension of being in those environments, and then still focusing on being a performer, trying to sing and those things. In the Air Force, it was
interesting,
even more.
because that's what I wanted to tell me about. What did you do exactly?
Started off in the Air Force as a linguist. I took a test that identified me as having the aptitude to hear languages naturally. So I qualified to be a linguist, and I went to the Presidio of Monterey out in California, which is essentially what they call the Harvard of all languages. So that was a good experience. The only reason I didn't stick with that at the time was because they chose a language for me, which was Korean. I didn't want to be in South Korea for the rest of my career. So I ended up switching careers and ended up in the culinary business, which I did not want to be. It kind of works out that way sometimes. Sometimes you end up doing things that you don't think is going to benefit you later in life. And I absolutely did not want to do the culinary at that time. But you know what? That turned out to be the basis of what I'm actually doing today. If I had not experienced the 11 years of expert culinary schooling and training that I got, then I wouldn't have been able to do some of the things that I ended up doing later, which is having leadership positions in the restaurant entertainment.
So it led you right into entertainment.
It did.
Now, as we come right back to the point where you talked about the stint that you did with Steven Spielberg, that big movie director, that fans of movies will know just from the mere mention of his name because he's as famous as most of the actors that he has directed in movies. What was that like working for him, and did you get to meet him personally and interact with him?
I did. It was an interesting experience because at the time in Las Vegas, Spielberg was partnering with a restaurant company called the Levy Restaurant Corporation. He liked their food. They liked, obviously, his ability to produce movies and themed places.
So plus his name recognition.
Absolutely. So he created this underwater themed sort of submarine concept called Dive. There was one in Century City in Los Angeles, and at the time, the one that I was at in Las Vegas. So I eventually became the GM of that concept. And let me tell you how Spielberg worked. Just to show you, this is back in 1995, to show you how much money he was making. There were times in which he would just call randomly and says, "Hey, Andre, how you doing? I have my friends coming in tonight. How's business?" Now, he had so much money going on in the other concepts. He just depending on he would look at our numbers and go, "Okay, that will help, right?"
Yes.
There were times in which we would need, let's say, some cash flow to fix something in a restaurant. We'd call one of his lead guys up, and we'd have a conference call about it, right? And he'd say, so what do you need, Andre? I says, look, we need $40,000 to buy a new torpedo for one of the submarines outside that's been damaged by the water. The guy would break out in laughter. He said, you need $40,000 and you guys are calling us about that? He says, Andre, do you know how much cash flow rolls through this company on a day-to-day basis? He said, no, how would I know? He says, we make $1 million a day. So I think we can handle that, and those are the kind of things that made it real prevalent to me at that time about being involved with a guy of that magnitude. At that time, I couldn't fathom somebody making $1 million a day. But when you look at what Spielberg was doing with his Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark theories and all of that stuff, at that time, that's the kind of money. So it turned out to be a great concept, great experience, and that just having that on my resume allowed me to get some other premium jobs. And I worked with Motown Cafe.
That's interesting. Whereas like when I saw that, my eyes popped out. I said, Motown Cafe. With this whole idea of the Motown event that we're doing, even right from here. But Motown itself, I'm sure it was tied to the Motown theme. And what was it like?
It was directly tied to the entire Motown thing. So there were several performers that got into the ownership piece, and they had several locations around the United States at the time. Now, the one that I was working at in Orlando wasn't doing as well financially as they wanted it to. I got recruited actually to come there, and ended up saving the concept. We put money to the bottom line, and it did really well. So we used to do events like Grown Folks Friday, in which people would actually dress up. I don't know, maybe we can think about that in Jamaica at some point. But they called it Grown Folks Friday to give people an event to attend in which they were wearing the suits and all the best stuff, and it was always the first Friday of the month. And I guess that's how some people have become, synonymous with these First Friday events in the United States and sometimes even in Jamaica. But that turned out to be a huge draw for us at Motown Cafe. But I enjoyed the concept because the concept was really all about Motown music. Look at Hard Rock Cafe, and the concept centers around music from all genres of music. But that was all about Motown music. I got to talk to some acts in Motown at the time, the Commodores. That was one of my best experiences. They performed at my cafe.
Well, Lionel Richie was still with them.
He wasn't with them at the time. That was during that time, the period in which they were without him.
Okay.
But I think that's when their biggest hit at the time was Night Shift. And that was huge for us having him on site. But there were, I think at the time, Tyrese was a part of that label. We did some stuff with him there. But that was a great experience in Motown.
What I would like to find out from you is whether they did live, like some of those acts would actually appear, live band, recorded music, whatever. Did they?
They would. In fact, What we did most often though were album release events. So
Okay.
if there was an artist from Motown that was releasing an album, what they would come and do is that we would do all the signings at Motown Cafe and the meet and greet with the audiences and things like that. So again,
That's interesting.
it was a great draw for us. R. Kelly one time, he was shooting a video at Universal Studios, came up and actually sang for me for free one night. He came in with his entourage. He says, "Listen, we're here shooting a video, and I had a VIP location on the third floor in that building. It was awesome because you could sit in VIP on the third floor, the way Motown was constructed,
Yeah.
and look down on the entire audience, right?
Okay.
So on this particular night, he said, if you'll just give me 2 bottles of champagne for me and my crew, I will sing for you for free. Well, who would want that? So we got a crowd of people on the inside, imagine this one, and all of a sudden they hear Kelly a cappella, and they thought it was some music. Yeah, they thought it was recorded music. They looked up and R. Kelly is singing. Can you imagine this just being on a regular club night, and you look up and R. Kelly is singing a cappella?
And at that time, he was at the height.
He was at the height of his career. So that was a great experience. But again, when you're able to couple experiences like that, having been the GM of Dive with Steven Spielberg, with Motown Cafe, I was a multi-unit director at Universal Studios in Orlando. Did some interesting concepts with a guy named Phil Romano, who created concepts like the Macaroni Grill, Fuddruckers, all those things. And we did a French restaurant together in Dallas. So I was able to draw on all those experiences.
from the Navy.
Correct.
No, so it took you into that whole entertainment zone. And food and entertainment is such a lovely marriage, wherever you go. And most restaurants these days and hotels, once you set up food and beverage, if you're not setting up something for entertainment, you're going to be missing out on something. Sometimes it's hindsight that they actually set up something afterwards,
Right.
which don't usually work well. I wish that they would come, even right here in Jamaica, and come to the understanding that when you're setting up a food establishment, set up your area for entertainment as well, because they both go so well. I want to talk, we've been on this journey with you in the States. I want to more or less forward now to your coming to Jamaica. How was that transition? What really led you? In most instances, people either stay,
Right.
or we have a lot of people who are moving away. What really led you to say, all right, I'm heading to Jamaica?
Margaritaville was what caused it. At the time, and it's an interesting story about how this comes together. You know that Brian Jardim and Ian Deere created the concept here.
Yes.
Now, it was spelled, that started in 1995, and it was spelled a little differently than it is today, right? It was, I think there was Marguer.
Yeah, they were trying to get around.
Right. Well, now, see, if you listen to them tell the story, Marguerite's, that fine dining restaurant that's next to the location on Bottom Road, the name Margaritaville was actually a derivative of that name. They really were not trying to infringe upon the name, the copyright, because at that time, Buck was not a huge name, like he is now. Now, he had a niche market of people that followed his music, the type of music. He had that, he had steel drums in his music. He had that sort of Caribbean feel to it anyway, because Bob Marley was a big influence on his life and his musical.
Interesting.
So, long story short, Ian and Brian had opened this location here in 95. They called it Margaritaville, and then they opened up one in the world the same way. Buffett was, he had opened Margaritaville locations in Key West, Florida, and one in New Orleans, little cafes. So he really wasn't into the restaurant business a lot. As you know, he made a song that these concepts are all about. Back in the late 70s, I think it was 1978, the song was a big hit called Margaritaville. And it was about it's really about this fictitious location that people went to drink tequila and just lose themselves in sort of a paradise. That's what the song was about. It's kind of like, look, I got drunk and I'm kind of getting wasted away in my thoughts, right? So anyway, someone convinced him to create 2 cafes off of that, and that's the one he opened up in Key West and one he opened up in in New Orleans. Margaritaville really hit it big in the United States in '99 when the president of Universal Studios called Buffett and said, listen, I've got a location here that Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player, was supposed to open up a location. Now, Shaquille was playing for the Orlando Magic at the time. He got traded to the Lakers, and so he decided not to open up that same restaurant. It was a pretty big location. I think it was at that time, it was 15,000 square feet. He thought that it would be great for Buffett to come in and open up one of his Margaritaville locations there. Buffett at the time says, listen, I'm not really into the restaurant business. I'm not to that level. I have 2 small little cafes. Well, anyway, they made a deal with him that says, here's what we'll do. We'll build out the location and split the profits. We'll do 50-50. Now, Warren, you're not stupid. You know that if someone decided to put your name on a concept and says, Warren, it's going to be all about you, and you don't have to put any money into it, and I'll split the cash with you every month. Would you do that? Okay, so that's what he did, and that's what created really catapulted Margaritaville to another level because they were in front of millions of tourists there who may not have known about the concept. So that's when the legal people got involved, and they decided to say, okay, who else around the world has this name Margaritaville? They found out the guys in Jamaica had a name called Margaritaville spelled differently. They sent them a legal notice that says you can't do that. And anyway, these guys didn't know anything about Buffett at the time, so it was really like they sent them a cease and desist letter. They're like, we don't recognize it because we don't know who you are, first off. And it turned into a negotiation because Chris Blackwell and Jimmy Buffett were friends. Yeah. Blackwell wanted to build this island village that you know about now, and he wanted Margaritaville to anchor it. Yeah. Blackwell mentioned it to Buffett one day and says, hey, listen, I got 2 guys here who have this great Margaritaville concept. They're going to open up one in Island Village. He says, no, you're not, because I own that brand. That's right. Well, the friendship that Blackwell had with Buffett sort of merged the relationships and said, look, can we all get together here and just talk about this thing? And they did. And that's how this deal really happened. He met Brian and Ian. Brian and Ian decided to have took a leap of faith and said they didn't know much about this thing, but he said, "I'll give you the rights to call this Margaritaville for X fee. You just pay me this and that, and then maybe we'll all benefit from this." And that's how it started. So when they signed the deal, what they really needed was someone to bring the brand to prominence here in the Caribbean. Not only in Jamaica, but also in the Caribbean. That's how the search began for me. I had left Universal Studios at the time. The president of Margaritaville told these guys that, look, I got somebody that I think can help you bring this brand to the next level. When they contacted me about it, ironically enough, I had never been to Jamaica at the time. I've been around the world, but it's not to Jamaica. So, Warren, I didn't want to do it. Yeah. I was like, listen, I'm busy. In fact, I was working with Dan Marino, the football player. We were working on some concepts for him. And so anyway, I sort of came over just to appease him. He was the president. I said, all right, fine. I'll go over, I'll take a look at it, let's see what happens. And then when I got over here, I loved it. I saw that they probably could use some refinement, and that's how my relationship with Jamaica started back in 2002. So you know what happened after that. I was able to influence the brand and doing a whole lot of things. We increased the revenue. We grew the brand outside to Cayman and Grand Turk. Was able to help create a brand that you know that became very famous here that I put my name on, but called Blue Beat. That was the Jazz and Martini bar at the time, so I created that concept and just refined what they did. And then I spent collectively 10 years with them. I did another brand called the Twisted Kilt, which you may have and then an opportunity came up 3.5 years ago for me to unite with my former partners in the Twisted Kilt to do the Hard Rock and a number of other locations. So that's really how this whole 16.5-year history started.
We're right at that juncture,
right,
where we're going to be taking a short break, and when we get back, we're going to be talking about the whole experience in Jamaica and the development of entertainment, because that is where the name Andre Dixon came into prominence until the name was almost as famous as Margaritaville itself. All right, one moment, we'll be right back.
Some businesses are the best kept secret in town, known only to a few friends and family. Advertising just can't be too much. Otherwise, Coca-Cola, KFC, and Burger King, all the big companies would cease to advertise. Instead, they advertise, and then advertise some more. Follow their good examples and let CTV introduce you to affordable, effective advertising. Don't delay. Call us today at 326-8747 or 396-6060. Advertise so they know. Advertise to grow.
Welcome back, people. I'm Tourism Hits, and we're coming to you from the Hard Rock Cafe. And I'm talking to the Chief Operating Officer of Viking Productions, who is more or less the direction of the Hard Rock brand, as well as other things. And Hard Rock is not just in Jamaica. Hard Rock is all over the United States. I don't know if other parts of the world. Of course, I'm talking to Chief Operating Officer Andre Dixon. Welcome back to Coke and Tourism Hits. We were at the point where we were talking about many different experiences that led to a stint at Margaritaville. And now I want to talk to him about his whole experiences in Jamaica and what it's like living here, because he came initially with some reservations, but he's been here for nearly 2 decades, decade and a half plus, and he has stayed. So it will be interesting to find out what are some of the things that we do. Andre, over to you. And with that very direct question, because I know it's quite a mouthful that I just asked you, relate some of the experiences.
Well, let me talk about Montego Bay specifically, because this is where I live and this is where I've spent most of my time for the last 16 years. Initially, as you know, the hip strip back then was hip in 2002. There were lots of brands, Margaritaville, Coral Cliff, and a few other hotels were open. So the place was vibrant and lively. Montego Bay as a city was lively. There were people going out to all the locations, Pier 1. There were even more, it seemed like at that time there were more restaurants. People would talk today talking about, well, there's nothing to do in Montego Bay. Well, at that time, there was a lot going on. There was the brewery on top of the hill. All those things were happening at the time.
I would see more visitors.
We did. The place was really lively. Now, at that time, crime in Montego Bay wasn't as big an issue as it is, of course, now. Because at the time, people were saying, okay, don't go to Kingston. Kingston is the worst place to be. And there were always travel agents telling people, don't go to Kingston. Montego Bay was fairly safe. You could go just about anywhere you wanted to go. And so what I did was, it was important for me to try and understand the process, right? Sometimes when people come from outside the environment to create concepts and themes and so forth, they come in, for the lack of a better word, like a bull in a china shop, right? They just come in and without really taking into consideration what the culture wants, how people are, how they react to certain things, you just start building it. I didn't see that as the right thing to do. In fact, the first year one, I was very quiet. I observed it. You see what the people are saying. You listen to people, speaking patois and so forth. Those are all things that I had to learn.
Yes.
And understand.
You picked up that quickly as linguist training.
Yeah, that's my language training. So, during that first year, I got to know the DJ, art, how things were positioned and talked about from a media standpoint. And so, I guess I became a quick study in the environment. And when I had all those elements together, that's when I began to create. And, I'm not going to tell you everybody embraced everything that I created. There were some naysayers initially that said, oh, what is he doing? That's not going to work. I heard a lot of that's not going to work, right? That's because people weren't taking enough chances. And my history really has been about risk taking.
Yeah, that's right.
If you want to win big,
Yeah.
you've got to
Take
risk
some
big.
risk.
You have to take some risks. And so I took some risks by creating programs and entertainment programs and things that people weren't familiar with previously. And to my credit, I say this modestly, they all worked
A
out.
lot of them
And
worked out fantastically. I
Yeah.
mean, Margaritaville was humming.
It was humming.
Was the place.
And we were able to get a broad cross section of people together that hadn't been coming out before. And so, as you know, the place was at its peak for many years.
Yeah.
Now we had an economic downturn in 2008 that affected Jamaica, and then you started to see. I think that economic downturn is synonymous with the beginning of some of the things that are happening now. When the economy started to go south, then the people in organized crime started to come up with more ways to create revenue.
Doing things.
Right. And so that sort of underbelly of element here in Montego Bay switched the focus of crime from Kingston to Montego Bay. And then all of a sudden, I mean, you can probably see that crime has ascended here from somewhere around 2010 to now. But that's when you started to see the murders and all those things that are associated with our problems today.
Quite a bit of ascendancy. And before we get to this very present, I want to linger a little bit, not so much for sentimental purposes, but more or less to trace your history and your relationship with the island, and dwell on that just a little bit more by asking you to delineate some of those experiences in terms of setting up residence, school work. What was part of that like for you? And your family
Right.
formed part of that
Well,
situation.
here's the unique thing. I came to Jamaica without a family. It was just me. You know, it's not like I had a wife or anything, which was probably to my credit back at that time.
Adventurous.
Yeah. I became very adventurous, and then that was good. I mean, Jamaica's got some beautiful women and just beautiful people as a whole. But I say that to say, growing up in the New Orleans area, the New Orleans area is very synonymous with some things that go on in Jamaica, right? The New Orleans is famous for its music, its food, the culture of New Orleans is entirely different from the rest of the United States. So even some of the corruption that is prevalent in New Orleans, some of those things are synonymous also with Jamaica. But it made it easier for me to acclimate to this environment because it's not like I grew up in North Dakota, in some place that didn't have the similarities in culture. So that helped me acclimate to this environment. The things that some things aren't always organized, some things aren't always planned. Jamaica's really not famous for that kind of thing. Right. It's an entire a culture that's built off the impromptu, right? But and we don't mean that negatively. That the impromptu nature of Jamaicans are able to create off of who they are. And so when you look at the core of music in New Orleans, and all those deep elements, same thing with reggae. So the food, like
reggae is that segue to dance on.
Correct. And so that made it easier for me to acclimate. When I first got here, I lived in neighborhoods that probably more expats were living in. You see, but you asked me how did I acclimate? I started moving out of those neighborhoods and in neighborhoods where there were more Jamaican.
More Jamaican in many respects. So from those experiences, you get to really feed into the culture and what Jamaica was all about. Because Margaritaville, talking about balance earlier on, offered balance because it relied not just strictly on tourists or visitors as patrons, but it had a significant following among the local population. I mean, that was the place for party for so many years.
It did, to its credit, when Buffett signed the deal here, Margaritaville had an element, the locations in Jamaica had an element that the ones in the U.S. didn't have, and that was a club. And so they sort of grappled with how would this brand remain synonymous with the Margaritaville brand if it still had a club. And they were able to say, listen, that's really what binds this thing here. The club element has to remain in order to sort of segue the daytime environment that the tourists usually offer. So that really, having that exception into the deal was what made the brand really work back in those days.
Unique too.
It was very unique. I don't know if the brand will ever get back to some of the days that it
Because
had back then.
there are a lot of things that are not getting back
Yeah.
to where it was. And as we moved away from that a little bit, just to talk about the present, and we were more or less tracing the origins probably of some of the immediate problems. Not all of it, but putting it into context that the economic downturn and a lot of things we see contributed to what we now see as an opening. Because as we sit here talking about tourism and so forth, I was listening on the radio while coming in. There were a lot of things running on. And I can tell you, last night in my real contemplation of doing this program, I wondered how it is that I was going to be able to talk and not touch on some of these things. And I know that it would be self-constraint, I could do it, but it's a bit of impossibility. It will take away the realness from what it is that we're doing and more or less sort of create just another fiction. Because we seem to live in a lot of fiction, a lot of make-believe. We do not want to confront issues, and not in a negative way when I use the word confront, but I believe that if we do not recognize, admit to problems, then there's just not going to be any solution. We have to face these problems truly. And I'm happy that you touched on it, and I would like you to elucidate a little bit more on what you see as the transition from where we were then to where we are now and some of the effects, because I know it has already started to take a toll on me personally, from a business point of view, from a personal point of view, family and so forth.
Right.
And I would just like you to touch on that.
Well, Jamaica has been fortunate because, let's be honest, it's not like this has been an island known for its Rebecca from Sunnybrook Farm attitude and nature ever. There's always been some crime going on. It's just that it hasn't been at this level, right? I mean, for how long have people been told, go to Jamaica, but be careful? It's still always been a be careful element. So, but you see, there's something about the magic of Jamaica that has still caused tourists to say, okay, well, I hear you, but I'm still going. Okay, so that has worked to the country's advantage really up until recently, because as you know, Montego Bay has taken a turn for the worse in terms of its murder. But this in last year in 2017, over 1,500 murders. That's in the country.
In the country.
But the significant amount of being right.
There are other parishes or cities or towns or whatever.
Correct.
And
Now,
that's not
as a businessman, there's some cause for trepidation because there's not a lot of interaction from a crime standpoint with the tourists, ironically. You know, it's mostly citizen on citizen type crime. A lot of it coming from some of the rougher neighborhoods. And now, as you know, one of the reasons we're in this position now is because that behavior has begun to spill over into what we call the populated areas. It seems like nobody was worried about it when there was, gang violence and so forth happening inside the neighborhoods, right? And still, that's something that we need to talk about. Crime as a whole has to recede in order for our businesses to succeed, because tourism is the holy grail here. I mean, without tourism, you may say it affects Jamaica, but we're talking about affecting. Sorry, you may say it affects Montego Bay, but it affects Jamaica entirely because a lot of the revenue that supports this country, getting room taxes and landing fees, and also that contribute to the Tourism Enhancement Fund comes obviously from tourism. So what happens if that disappears? Then it will have a significant effect on the ability for the country to create revenue from taxation, right? Now, so it will also have an effect on business people like me on investing in the country. Who wants to invest in a country when we're undergoing what we're at right now? And you haven't said the words, but we're under a state of emergency, right? And in the, it's sad because we had to get to the point of having a murder in the roundabout area of the airport in order for somebody to wake up. And we know that that's not the singular event that caused it. There's been cries since 2016. I remember Charles Sinclair called it a state of emergency. Yeah, for a state of emergency back then. Now, the JHTA and the Chamber of Commerce has often shut that language down because they would say, "Listen, if you do that, it's going to hurt us badly." And I was one of the ones that supported that back at the time because no one wanted to see that. But you look at our situation now, when what was it, 6 days ago, that the Prime Minister called the state of emergency. Even the tourism agencies said, "You know what? It's time for it to happen." Because we're in a situation in which we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. If they had not come in and addressed it, then what would have continued to happen? And then by them coming in and addressing it, yeah, it's certainly going to have and is having a negative effect on us. When you impose curfews, you look at my organization here. The state of emergency says that I should close at 11:59 on Fridays and Saturdays and 9 o'clock during the week. Now, I'd love to be able to push that to those hours. You know why I can't sometimes? Because the populace of my employees live in neighborhoods in which they have to get back before that time. They're not going to be able to get in transportation. So there's an effect that people aren't even seeing about this. Yeah, I'd love to be able to get more revenue even during the state of emergency, but my employees are being affected. So how are we going to cure this thing, right? Even after, the state of emergency says it's mandatory for 14 days, and then it could extend as much as 90 days after that. Now, certainly I don't want to see it go 90 days after that. We're in the midst of the busiest time of the tourism season. That will certainly hurt us greatly if it goes outside of the 14 days.
Just to interject, I was a little bit reluctant in so many instances. And most people know my expressiveness when it comes to things. And I'm not just been talking about this is a topic that has been on. And where we are today, and this is not even segueing from the whole program that we're doing. It's the reality that we must face, and as I said earlier, if we do not face our problems, we won't be able to solve them. I would have loved the opportunity to sit down with some of the players who made the decision of the SOE before they actually made the decision. My grandmother, a very unlettered woman, in the simplest of ways, had the most profound expression. She always said that there's more than one way to hang a dog without putting a rope around its neck. And I really would have loved to see something more effective with a lot less excitement and the consequences that comes with it. And I know deep in my heart and in my head that could have happened. Had I just had an inkling or a little bit of the responsibility that I'm going to get in a different way, I tell you, we would not be suffering from the disruption. The disruption extends not only from tourism, but even to our simple business. My wife and I run a small eatery, and just going to get the first evening to get produce from the supermarket. By the time we got to the supermarket, it was closed. Fortunately, the relationship that we had, they gave me a fly, so to speak, to come on in and get some items that were badly needed. I went through all of that serious. we're at this point where it's only a few days, and in doing an informal, more or less census, they are polled. It's about if we get another 40, another 15, another 30 days, it would destroy
It's going to be rough.
what it is that will get. It would be almost, if not worse, than a hurricane. And I do hope that before they decide to go down this road, that they come to a consensus. I'm not afraid of saying this. Plain and straight, there needs to be another way to look at this. Because so far, it has quelled the situation because there's a presence, but there's no real hard finding. 4 guns have been found so far. What has happened is, and there's a lot of bragging about this, that there hasn't been any major crime apart from that first day when there was some shooting incident in one of the garrison area. But this could be dealt with in a different way. A better way needs to be found. Presence is what is required for security, and we need to get to that point so that we can get out of this mix. Because if we don't, I am just afraid of what the fallout is going to be. How long, if we dig a hole, what long will it take for us to come out of the hole?
Let me tell you what I think needs to happen. Firstly, with us being in the early stages of this thing, if there isn't a long-term plan for the way policing is going to go about affecting change here, then we'll be right back where we are. Now, and I say that by saying this. The Minister of Security and the Minister of Justice need to come together with a collaborative effort to do a couple of things. Before this SOE happened, you know that one of the big issues was right during the holidays was pay for the police, right? So the police are severely underpaid. Now, that's falling on deaf ears as of right now. So if we do not have a police force that somehow they address the concern of the police to get paid, we're going to have a continuous morale problem. And I'm going to continue talking about policing. The other thing is that they're losing senior leadership in the police force, right? So if the constabulary force does not have the veterans that they used to have, and they're losing them for a couple of different reasons. One is because of just the morale problem and them not wanting to deal with the level of crime that's happening in Jamaica. And the other reason is that some of them are corrupt. They need to weed some of them out. So what does that leave the police department with? A bunch of youthful recruits. And with those youthful recruits, you know what they do? They will take them from one parish, put them in another parish. And if you bring recruits from an area of Jamaica and they don't know about St. James Parish, then the criminals are going to run circles around them because they don't know what the criminals do here and how they act. So when you look at this, if we don't fix the policing problem with pay, with ways to try and retain the good senior people in the police force right now, then we're going to be facing this issue for a long time. And I say that, and I mean it as strongly as I can say it as a business person here. Policing and the collaboration of the security agencies and the collaboration of the justice agencies has to come together to stop this problem, to eradicate this problem. It has to be a long-term problem that exists outside of what I hope will be the end of 14 days to do this thing. They have detained in excess of 200 people. Now, detaining doesn't really mean anything. It means that they probably went in the neighborhood and found some youth that were hanging around on the corner, right? And they bring them in for questioning. Now, that can have a negative effect as well, because if you bring some innocent people in, you detain them past whatever the suggested time is to detain someone, then what are they going to do when they get out? then they also now have angst against the agency, and then you really want to stir up something that didn't exist in you that were not a problem. So that's what I mean by saying justice has to be a part of this also. You got to look at the justice side, you got to look at the security side, and then they have to come together and say what's going to be the long-term plan for figuring out this problem in Montego Bay and Jamaica as a whole. But Montego Bay is the big problem right now. So one, it's a serious issue that has to be discussed. If they've taken the time to ruin some of what's happening in tourism right now, then let's let the fallout be a positive fallout. If it's got to happen, we're going through it now. It's killing the small businessman and the large businessman like me simultaneously. So this has to happen. And we as citizens must force this to happen. These are, our elected officials. We're not being loud enough. Our voices as a community, as citizens, are not loud enough to say, listen, do not just leave the effects of this, of the SOE and then leave us going back to square one. You have to improve the policing part of this business and the justice part of this business in order for everyone to survive, or they're going to go back to exactly what they were doing before.
As you look at it in context, and sometimes I don't like to make comparisons because we have our own problems here. I would like to look at the but in terms of the governance, the discipline, what would you say is missing? Because it is not, as far as I'm concerned, some people know my inclination sometimes. But again, sometimes they miss, because they pick the judge or the label, they miss the really important thing, that there's balance. And as an elder statesman,
right,
and a citizen who has been through much, I understand and know what balance is. I do not tolerate things that cannot coincide and speak close to the truth. It must be able to stand the truth test. Our situation as it is now in terms of discipline, the governance, and what needs to be done. What would be some of the things that you would suggest or like to see? Being a military man, traveling all over the world, and you have the experiences from a lot of countries that you would have visited, stayed extended period, and even lived in. What are some of the things that you will see that we could bring to bear upon our situation and to bring a positive result?
Okay, well, two things. I think that a lot of people have talked about, and some people laugh about it now, that how Singapore came years ago to Jamaica to look at Jamaica as a model for saying, listen, we need to be like Jamaica. Let me look at some of the things they were doing. How funny is that now? As you look at what they've done to their economy. All right. So what have they done? Well, first off, some people may think that Singapore goes a little bit too far, and Jamaicans will never put up with that. But I tell you what, when Singapore went with very strong disciplinary actions toward people who were committing crimes, even public flogging and things like that. And again, I'm not saying that should happen here. But what they did, it was a collaborative effort to not put up with indiscipline, which we put up with. When I say it was a collaborative effort, they said, this will not happen. You're not going to break rules here. Right? So there needs to be a stronger element to that. It'll never stop in Jamaica. But at some point, you have to say that there are rules on the books. It's not like rules don't exist. There are plenty of laws in Jamaica. Books this big with laws. It's the enforcement.
Some of them antiquated.
And some of them antiquated. But it's the enforcement of the law. So one, improve the approach to indiscipline, right? And that falls under a big umbrella. Two, look at how other people have done it from a task force standpoint. We say that we study things, but we don't bring them here and implement them. So, Rudolph Giuliani. I'm no Rudolph Giuliani fan from a political standpoint. But when he was mayor of New York City, remember, before he took over, the crime element was huge.
That's right.
The New York was in the same state that Jamaica's in right now. The criminals were running the city. And so no one wanted to go anywhere. They want to walk downtown New York. The mayor came in and said, no. So what did he do? What we're not doing now, again, commit to funding the police force. Give them the tools that they need, right? So, and then look at that template that they created and act on it and don't stop until it's eradicated. Period.
One of the principles, and I thank you very much for that. One of the principles, the broken window effect, and I know you know about and we're not so big on that. From the smallest thing, and that was the principle that was involved. And the broken window effect says that if somebody throws something in the street, or actually breaks a window literally, and nothing is done about it, then it moves from that to something a little bigger, and something a little bigger, until it gets to where we are. The broken window principle needs to be applied without fear of shame. Where the families give another school and deal without problems and in discipline. And while we're doing that, we should also look at the issue of justice, social justice. There's something that there's a phrase that I like. It's called intervention. There's something about it that escapes me at the moment. But what it is basically, it's social intervention that we believe you can come in and give care packages and this and some temporary things to people.
Right.
And I always sit back and look at it and say, hey, a bit of madness. We need to look and give people opportunities for them not to just exist or to survive, for them to live meaningful lives, so that they can see themselves as citizens and a part of this whole environment. Because there are a lot of Jamaicans who don't see themselves as part of Jamaica. They have no sense of patriotism, and we can sit down and discuss the right or the wrong of it, but they don't feel a part of the community because the community is not part of them. They are more or less spat out on the side, but they are reality. They're here and have to be dealt with in a way to make the thing inclusive or all inclusive so that all Jamaicans feel comfortable about being Jamaican.
Right.
There's a way to do it. And that is what is going to bring that real sunshine spirit that we're seeking. We need to do that. And better can be done from where I sit, observing the problems. Sometimes I engage in a tremendous amount of battles. Social media, in the general media, and in day-to-day life. And I will not retreat from the position that what we need is a fairer society where all the people see themselves part of this national community, where there's an interest in taking care of the things that we see being destroyed because we know that that belongs to you as well.
Right.
How are we going to get it?
Well, I think Jamaicans have shown you that they react to things changing and being better, right? When you look at the things that have changed in, let's say, the past 15 years, there's some things one have taken a quantum leap. You look at the airport, right? Our airport, admittedly, was antiquated. When it was privatized, it changed the whole nature of the city, did it not? So when you start off, and this is an example of when you create one good thing, it can create a domino effect of other good things. So what happens when you create a great airport with first world things? You got to create better hotels for people to stay in because you have more people coming in, right? And better hotels helps create more jobs. And then when you have more people coming from other environments, you need to give them other options here in the city, right? Better hospitals, right? So we've seen better hospitalization. Some of it's a little expensive, but it's better, right? We've seen better shopping opportunities. Look at Fairview, and Witter Village. I mean, it has created this domino effect of things that did not exist, all from just creating one good thing. And the same way we're talking about now with crime and addressing the economy here. Create one good thing, stick with it and build on it. And if our government will commit to that, right now, the BPO sector is growing. Now, whether you like or dislike the BPO sector, some of them are not necessarily high-paying jobs, but they're jobs, right? And so when you look at showing someone the evidence that, look, everyone, we're creating these jobs, so don't say that there's not jobs. Well, they're not great jobs. So that's what causes another element of people to somehow gravitate to the get rich quick schemes, right? Is because they want that instant gratification, that instant money. So somehow we're going to have to create an example of advantages for people who live what we call normal lives, to show them, look, there's benefit in living a normal life, because the side effects of you taking the get rich quick scheme is probably dangerous. It's probably looking over your shoulder. Do you want that? You see, and we've got to prove that people in prison. You see, but we've got to prove that. We've got to show them that, look, this type of crime doesn't pay. And like everything, there have been a number of things that have existed since the beginning of time that looked good and looked like it would never end, right? This is never going to end. The Roman Empire fell, right? Well, this will fall at some point, but it's not going to fall by itself. This thing is not going to disappear unless we come up with great economic strategies, great security strategies, and great social programs to let our people know. And when we say social programs, I'm not talking about free stuff. I'm talking about teaching people the benefits of living a good life as a citizen. Pick up trash off of the street. This is just normal things. Don't do a U-turn where you're not supposed to do it. These are all things that we should, it has to start somewhere. And unless we attack these things one by one, or we can do them simultaneously, but there also has to be, like I said, a simultaneous commitment from all of the government agencies combining themselves with the private sector. And when that happens, you'll see change. I haven't seen that yet, but when that happens, you will see change.
Well, we're going to get there. And we're going to get there by the hook or the crook. And I'll tell you what, when we started off this interview, I said it was going to be 20 minutes. But I knew deep down that there's so much that we are making. We are just touching the surface. You know that there's going to be a part two to this, because there's still a lot more. I want to take the opportunity to thank you very much for yourself on the end. This is our first program for 2018. There'll be many more to come. Trust me on this.
I want to say before you go, Warren, people have not experienced Hard Rock Cafe. You got to come down and check it out.
Of course.
I heard you talking about where it may have been located before. There's over 200 locations worldwide.
Wow.
So we're fortunate to have one of these locations here in Jamaica.
That's right.
There's something that's able to offer a broad cross-section of international food and drink items along with local food and drink items. So 50%, I'm proud to say, of our patronage here in Hard Rock comes from the local, right here in Montego. People are showing us that they appreciate it.
And I find that it's on the brunch to mention one of the only and finest one anywhere in Montego. Hard Rock Cafe. That's for sure. And again, thank you very much for part of our interview. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, yours are one love, take care. That's the nutrition of hope.
That's deep.
Yeah. What a deep, that's all of it.